We're talking about about some really interesting concepts of zk proof. But before that, I'll give us a short intro about the context of what is actually happening here and who is running this thing. Um, so we are zk proof, and zk proof is a global movement, and we are a group of developers, academics, practitioners who all believe in the technology that's called zero knowledge proofs. And we believe that in order to really make it happen and come to its full potential, we need to come together, standardize it, and work together to increase the use cases and the adoption among the global community and global industry. We are active for a bit over 3 years now, and we're running all kinds of activities to support this goal. And I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing now. One thing that is happening now is we're starting a new blog post that's called The Art of Zero Knowledge, in which experts will come and put some of their key results and research online for people to see, to debate, to learn. And this is more for people with experience that can follow through the math. And our first blog post will be given by Professor Dario Fiore, and it will be around zero knowledge proofs for SET membership. And we're going to publish that around the end of this month. So now it's being edited as we speak. Another thing that all of you know, that this is why you all came here, is our expert series. And it's around the fundamentals of zero knowledge. And we're doing that together with the Ethereum Foundation and zk-GLOBAL. And the idea here is to give people the context and the background about the fundamental topics of zero knowledge, even if they are not experts, even if they don't know all the math and all the details, even if they do, to get deeper into this field and to allow you get inside this exciting technology. And I'm already, although today we're going to hear Murray in our first webinar, I'm already going to give you a little teaser for our next webinar that's going to happen in March 4th. And that's going to be around how scaling Ethereum with SNARKs, and will be given by Michael Ryabzev from Starkware. So if you enjoyed this one, you will definitely enjoy the next chapter of this webinar. Our main event that's happening every year is the annual workshop, and I'm gonna let Daniel here, my colleague, to tell us a bit about that.
So thank you all again for joining. This is very exciting. As you can all see, I think we already have like 43 participants. So thank you, Yael, for that introduction. That was very on spot. We're very excited with all the things that are happening, and we're very excited that this is happening today. So thank you, Mary, again. The third workshop is actually taking place in April. The main annual workshops that zk-Proof hosts are basically the place where we kind of put the most effort to advance the standards and advance the kind of community sentiment around the best practices and guidelines. This is where last year, for example, we consolidated the second version of the zk-Proof community reference document, which I encourage you all to go to the website and check out. Now, in this next workshop, we're going to have a mix of talks as well as conversations or discussions, as we used to have, as we've had in the past as well. We had a good amount of submissions for papers and proposals. Now, one second. Yeah. So here are the keynote speakers that are confirmed so far. So Tal Rabin, Professor Rosario Genaro, Karmit Khazai, and Jan Kamenish all have very interesting topics lined up for you. And we hope to see you there. If you're interested and can make it to London, then we really encourage you. We're still you're still on time to get your early bird tickets, which finish by the end of the month. So go for it. And without further ado, let's kind of jump into what we've all come here to do, to listen to Mary Muller. So Dr. Mary Muller, she's currently a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, but she graduated, she did her PhD in cryptography at University College London. And we're very excited to hear from her. She's definitely one of the top experts in bilinear pairings, SNARKs, and CRS generations, and so on. So without further ado, please, Mary.
Yeah, one last thing, just logistics. We're going to have Mary talk for around 1 hour, and then we'll have time for questions. So if you have any question during the time, just you can write it on a note, and then we'll have time for that at the end. So enjoy. And Mary, you can now share your screen.
You're on mute, yeah, okay.
Thank you for the introduction, by the way. Sorry, I totally forgot to share my screen there. Try again. So before, I don't know what's going wrong now. Ah, there we go. Can everyone see it okay?
Yep.
Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about zero-knowledge proofs. I'm going to have a real focus on the techniques that we use to build them when we're in a setting where we have bilinear pairings, which I'll explain a little bit what those are. The reason I'm focusing on these techniques is because they are widely used mostly. They're not the only technique. You can certainly build zero-knowledge proofs from discrete log or groups of unknown order, or even just from hash functions. But they're a technique that tend to yield pretty efficient SNARKs. Okay, so first things first, why to use pairings and why not to use pairings. In terms of good reasons to use them, they have very small proof sizes and very fast verifier time. And this means that if you have an application for which verifier time or proof size really sort of matters, you're probably going to sort of go towards them. They've also been very well standardized. There are curves which you can choose which have been well studied, which have had people do security audits on, which have had many years worth of people improving them and finding fast algorithms for them. So you're not working with something too new and scary. Well, you might be on the zkP side, but you won't be on the pairing side. On the downside, they tend to have quite a slow prover, particularly compared to hash-based schemes. The public parameters can be quite large. Sometimes you need quite a lot of storage on your device, which if you're trying to run things over mobile devices might not be so great. They are not quantum secure, and they are too heavy machinery for something which is relatively simple. Like if you're just trying to prove that a single number is between 0 and 16, is the simple example I gave, then you might want to choose something that's a little lighter. So the key property of a bilinear pairing is the bilinearness of it. So if you remember the dot product, this is just a map which takes two vectors to a field, and it has the property that if you have two vectors in a producted with another two vectors, then you can split them out such that this addition equation holds. So a bilinear pairing is like an extension of this to 3 groups rather than 2 fields and a third field, such that in all 3 groups you have that the discrete logarithm holds. And by that we mean that given any element in the group, well, any 2 elements in the group, it should be hard to find an element in the field such that y equals g to the power of x. And importantly, we have a bilinear property such that we can split out elements which are paired together. This gives us the ability to check quadratic relations. So if you look here, we have that e of g to the power of a times h to the power of b is equal to e of gh to the power of ab. You can also swap these around, so this would also be equal to e to the power of ab paired with h, and do lots of manipulations of this kind of form. And I've given a sort of true or false at the bottom there for people that are wanting to, maybe not so familiar with pairings and wanting to sort of try it out. And I'll give maybe another couple of seconds for you to write down the question. Might not give enough time for you to solve it just now. Okay, I'm going to move on. Oh, also, if you want to know more details about how pairings actually work, as opposed to just how to use them, which is more what this talk is going to be about, then I highly recommend Pairings for Beginners, which is a textbook by Craig Costello. It's online, it starts right from the very basics and goes really quite in detail. So when we're building SNARKs, we have different models of security. And this is the idea that when we're arguing that our scheme is secure, we can't just say it's secure because I can't break it. We want to say it's secure because of this logical reason, usually the logical reason being a security proof. And ideally, we'd like the security proof to be in the standard model, but this is not possible for SNARKs where the witness is small. Sorry, not the witness is small, where the SNARK is small in comparison to the prover's information. So what we have to do is we have to use less standard models, which we still believe to be secure. We still believe that they hold, but they're maybe a little bit less nice than the standard model. The options that we have here, well, just the first layer down is either knowledge of exponent assumptions. These are assumptions rather than a model, but they're very non-standard assumptions, and the random oracle model. And if you were to ask me which of these 2 is better, honestly, I couldn't tell you. I can tell you that the random oracle model has been around for a little bit longer, and maybe in that sense we trust it more. But equally, we don't really understand either of these ideas. Then there is the algebraic group model, which is an extension of these knowledge of exponent assumptions. And finally, there is the generic group model, which has huge merits in the sense that it is very easy to verify a proof in the generic group model. So if you are looking for bugs or mistakes that a cryptographer has made, then this would be the model that you would probably choose to analyze it in. But if you're wanting to say that there is a more fundamental reason why your scheme should be secure, you might choose to use one of the other models. So the standard model is what we consider to be a realistic simulation even of the world. And we want to depend on heuristic falsifiable assumptions. So what I mean by heuristic is that the assumption holds because we have been trying for a long time to break it and we haven't found a way. all of crypto is built around assumptions like this. But if it's falsifiable, then what that means is it means that if somebody has broken the assumption, then we can prove it. We know that it's been broken. The example I'm giving is for computing inverses in a finite field. Someone could come along and say, my scheme is secure, assuming that someone cannot break inverses. To which you could then come along later and say, actually, no, it's not secure because here is my specific algorithm, Euclid's algorithm, which can break this assumption in polynomial time. So I'm going to give an example of an encryption scheme which is secure under the symmetric external Diffie-Hellman assumption, which is a non-falsifiable assumption. Sorry, it is a falsifiable assumption, I'm confusing them, falsifiable. And I would consider this to be the bilinear alternative of the decisional Diffie-Hellman assumption. And the encryption scheme I'm going to describe is going to be an alternative to AlgoMal. Possibly not one that you would ever use. I cannot think of a good reason to use it off the top of my head, but it does nicely sort of describe how pairing schemes work. So first off, here's our assumption, given g to the power of a and g to the power of b in one of the source groups, but not the other source group. You cannot distinguish a third element, g to the power of a times b, from just a randomly sampled element in the field. Here, our public keys are given by g to the power of x in g1, and our secret keys are given by h to the power of x in g2. And this is actually quite a nice property of this scheme, the fact that the secret key is itself a group element. This means that we get something which is structure preserving. How does our encryption work? Well, it is similar to AlgoMal. We first take in a message, which is going to be some element in our target group. And to encrypt that message, we're first going to sample some randomness from the field. And we're going to hide our randomness inside a discrete logarithm. So our first ciphertext is just going to be g to the power of y. For our second one, we have the public key. So we can compute e of the public key paired with h to the power of y. And that's going to be our encryption. Now to decrypt, if you have the secret key, then what you can do is you can pair the first ciphertext with your secret key and divide your second ciphertext by that value. And what we say when we're arguing about this thing being secure is we say that if an adversary cannot distinguish encrypted messages, sorry, if an adversary can distinguish encrypted messages, then they can also distinguish real from random that uses only the coefficients which they are given in the structured reference string. And then you're going to want to argue something about the restrictions which are put on these polynomials which the adversary has output due to the verifier's equation. And then you're going to want to say, actually, these restrictions which are put on our polynomials suffice in order to claim that the evaluation V is actually equal to f of alpha. Are there any questions?
I have a question about just polynomial commitments in general. I don't have much experience with them, but from what you said so far, are they a way to, is it like a zero knowledge proof to a value?
Yes, that would be even how they're sometimes defined. This idea that you can have a zero knowledge proof for the relation I know f of x such that f of x is a correct opening to my commitment and f of alpha equals b.
Yeah, and you're never revealing x in this process, right, with the opening?
No, you're never revealing. Well, x is secret, so even the prover doesn't know that. It's f of x that you are. So there are hiding variations where you can say that you reveal no information at all about f of x. And then there are non-hiding variants where you reveal a little bit of information about f of x. And if you're using the hiding variant, then claiming zero knowledge is very easy. You just say your commitment scheme is hiding. And if you're using the non-hiding variant, then it's a bit more complicated. You have to say that there is enough randomness already in your scheme in order to cancel out any extra information that the adversary is going to learn from your opening of the polynomial.
Okay, and where do the like A, B, and C's of this come from? Like, what are those?
Sorry?
The A, B, and C of this like inner product you're defining here, what are those exactly?
So those would relate to how you're describing your relation. So different ways of describing relations are in different papers. The most classic is R1CS, but that just uses Y values A. But what you'll have if you look at, for example, bullet proofs is that they have an arithmetic circuit. So the idea that you have different wires representing different values, which lead into either multiplication gates or addition gates, and then output either the multiplication or the addition of those two values into the third wire. And these arithmetic circuits are, enough to describe MP. So if you have something like that, then typically what you'd have is you'd have that the AI values correspond to your left input wires to multiplication gates. Your BI values correspond to right input wires into multiplication gates, and your CI values correspond to output wires of the multiplication gates. So I'll go back a few slides. That's here. So if you can see here, what we're checking is that AI times BI minus CI equals 0. And that would correspond to left input times right input minus output equals 0. So left input times right input equals output. Does that make sense?
A little bit. I'll have to just, I think, study up more on it too.
Okay, sorry. Maybe a bit of a quick explanation. Okay, so I'm just going to finish with some advice for reading research papers if you're actually intending to spend quite a lot of time on it. The first bit of advice is that this is not one of those subjects where you can just dabble in papers and sort of read a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one and expect to understand them. Reading papers takes a long time, like on the order of weeks, not hours, weeks. So given the fact that you are expecting to spend a long time reading this paper, keep the bigger picture in mind. Like, if you're reading it, why are you reading it? What's important about it? Does it have contributions which you're interested in? Does it have techniques that you're interested in? Is it something that you're going to use? And if the answer to like this question is yes, and you go ahead and read it, then don't expect it to be a static process. Don't sit in front of the paper with it on your computer screen and expect it to go in by osmosis. You're going to have to print it out. You're going to have to, or else use like one of those doodle pads that I've seen people using or something like that. You're going to have to write on it. You're going to have to be highlighting important areas, areas that you have to understand. You might even need spare paper in order to work through something if you need a little bit more space. Second thing, there is some jargon in this field which comes up the whole time. And once you're familiar with the jargon, it gets a bit easier. So one thing which you'll see a lot is roots of unity and FFTs and interpolation. So it's worth reading the Wikipedia page even on that. You should also know what we mean by MP, what we mean by instance and witness and language and relation. These are complexity theory terms, which are basically our way of describing what does it mean to be a computational problem. More from the sort of cryptography side of things, you're going to need to know what a security parameter is, what it means for something to be negligible or overwhelming, what we mean by probabilistic polynomial time, what we even mean by adversary and algorithm. And lastly, when it comes to reading definitions, these have a particular flavor which takes a bit of time getting used to. And I wouldn't start with a research paper, I would start with a textbook. And after you've read a textbook, maybe read the definitions, but before you've read a textbook, skip them. Don't be intimidated. It's okay to not understand most of a paper. It's okay to take a long time on something, understanding something. You're not going to just look at a cryptography paper and instantly get it. That would be extremely impressive, but it doesn't work like that. Also, do look for other sources. Like, it could very well be that there's a paper in the related work which is very useful for understanding this paper, or maybe even is closer to what you want to do than reading this paper. Likewise, there might be online resources which might help if you don't understand the author's explanation. Don't feel obliged to read it in order. If the paper is written by a good writer, which not all papers are, but some are, then the writer will probably have made an effort to make sure that readers can skip bits and try and keep things self-contained. They might not always succeed, but they'll have tried to do this. And again, if you only learn one thing, this is a success. This means you've learned something. On the more technical side of things, the first thing you need to look for is how is the paper representing the constraint system. So they might be looking to cover all of MP, or they might only be covering specific languages. It might be the case that they're working with machine computations. So the idea that you have like some memory that you can access, and then you can update the memory from time to time, and then there'll be an execution trace. Or it might be the case that actually all of their constraints are just in a list or a matrix or something, and you read them off one by one. Once you've got a feel for what the constraint system even is, you're then going to need to look at how are the input constraints and the linear constraints and the quadratic constraints covered. Because all three of them need to be covered somewhere, and they will be. It's just a matter of finding it. And the third thing to look for is, are there any limitations on the memory? So the number of inputs which you can check in a linear constraint at any given moment in time. And if the answer is yes, often the answer is yes, then is the constraints on the memory large enough that it would be a problem for your application? Again, once you've done that, still more technical stuff. Look for where the protocol is specified. The thing you should especially pay attention to is the verifier. And you can sort of look at the verifier, write it out in whatever notation you prefer. You'll see lots of people talking about additive notation versus multiplicative notation as if this is the most important thing in the world. It's not. Use whichever one you like. That goes for most notation, I would say. Use what you're comfortable with. There's no rules. The next thing you need to look for is to check that you agree that the protocol is correct. Like, if there's one thing which is going to make you understand how the protocol works, it's checking correctness. So what you do here is you specify the prover, again, in whichever notation you prefer. You specify the verifier, and you just check that the honest prover convinces the honest verifier. And the last thing you can do is you can also check that the protocol is sound. And typically when I'm doing this, I would, unless I'm interested in the techniques they're using for some reason or other, I would typically just ignore the author's proof and write it out myself in the generic root model, because I think this gives you a better understanding. It's more interactive. Okay, that's the end of my prepared slides. So questions if there are any.
Maybe just to say thank you very much, Mary. If we were in person, I would definitely say, you know, please let's thank the speaker because of the end. But so if you all wanna just clap in silence or something, you know, you're welcome. And are there any questions about content, about future potential directions of study? Just a reminder that this is basically supposed to be this kind of introduction to the zero knowledge space, you know, from the perspective of bilinear pairings. And you know, Mary did a really good job at putting out exactly what kind of the advice that you need to follow to get into more depth of the technology.
Yeah, I have another question for Mary. Thanks for the talk, and thanks for all the recommendations on like reading papers and stuff. That's, I think, really good for somebody newer. And related to that, how do you, so some of your advice was like finding sort of good papers to read rather than the ones that are less good. How do you have any like heuristics or ways that you approach doing that and like kind of picking the ones that are going to be best to read?
So the easiest way is to look for the big conferences, because typically if you have a sort of fairly famous researcher from that's been doing this kind of thing all their life and this is their best work, they're really proud of it, they're not going to want it to just be languishing on some archive site. They're going to want it to be published, and they're going to want it to be published somewhere where it's going to get seen. Likewise, the sort of top conferences, they're not going to accept papers which they don't find interesting. They're only going to accept things where, like, even if the papers are correct, if they're not interesting, then people will say this is not interesting and they won't accept them. So what you can do is you can just go through the recent years of the accepted papers lists, and you can look for the topics which you're interested in. The second thing I would say is to read related work. If somebody has spent a lot of time writing related work, they will have read a lot of these papers, decided which ones that they like for themselves, and they'll be pointing you towards them. They'll be saying, this is a good one to read, or that is a good one to read. And probably the third thing, you sort of saw my flow diagram for that, is the paper well written. If it's not well written, it might not be worth it, because that 2 weeks might become sort of 8 weeks, which maybe you're not so willing to spend.
Thanks, Mary. Just before kind of more people start leaving the call, I mean, you know, we're happy to have more questions. I just wanted to say a couple of things again. That this talk by Mary was a very good introduction and kind of putting into context the different parts of the theoretical aspects of using zero knowledge proofs. There is of course a lot of other topics, both in the theoretical side, but also in terms of applications and how to build these protocols, and also in terms of implementations and libraries existing out there. And this is also kind of what we're trying to do with this webinar. So, just a reminder that in 2 weeks or so, we're gonna have Michael Ryabzev, who's I think was in this call at some point. And we're gonna hear from him on how to use SNARKs to scale Ethereum. So it's kind of both about applications and about how to use a different kind of proving system. I also wanted to say that we have, as part of ZK-Proof and part of the community, kind of different resources. So I just shared a few links on the chat. So the first link is just zkproof.org. That's where you will find most of the different kind of information regarding zero knowledge proofs, or the standardization of zero knowledge proofs. Then we have docs.zkproof.org. This is actually a new kind of link that we have for sort of wiki that we're creating, where you're going to see there all the different papers that are being discussed and all the different outputs and documentation from ZK-Proof. zkp.science is actually a really good resource that is curated by Jack Grigg from the Electric Coin Company. And it has a kind of a reference to many of the papers and that exist today, and libraries that are being used by developers and all kinds of stuff. And the last link is just the forum of ZK-Proof, community.zkproof.org. Please feel free to go there and ask any questions about this webinar. To Mary directly, you can probably also reach her there, and to the community in general. And if you go and check out the reference documents that exist today, you most likely find a lot of the information that was shared today. But if you don't find something you find meaningful, please do let us know, and we'll make sure to incorporate that as well. And I see that Michael is indeed here as well. So, yeah. Any more questions to Mary in this case?
Cool. Well, thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you.
And thanks all for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Very much.